Thank you, folks. Please, let's start by welcoming director Evan Oppenheimer. Evan. Thank you so much. There's a full red moon behind us, by the way. It's like a perfect night. Evan, do you want to invite up others?
Yes, thank you, Isaac. I definitely want to now. I'm not sure everybody who's here. We had people show up on Sunday who I didn't know were here, and I can't see the audience at all. So let's start with the people who I know are here. Kate MacCluggage, I know you're here. Come on up, Kate. Kate, you'll recognize from her fantastic scenes with Jackie Burns as Daphne Meyerson. Kate had longer hair at the time. And they had those great scenes walking down the street together. I know Allyson Morgan is here, our Mrs. Epstein, the real estate transaction scene. So the Meyersons are all out of town. They all wish they could be here, and they're all away except for one who's supposed to be rapping. I don't know. Come on up. Brian Fitzgerald. There's a surprise for me. Hey, I haven't seen you. Young Roland. Now, the interesting thing about this movie is that most of the actors have never met each other because there are all these different vignettes, all these different scenes. And I think the actors we had at the first screening, there were 4 or 5, and they had never met. There is another Meyerson here, and that is the youngest Meyerson, my daughter, Talia. Talia has grown about 3 feet since we shot the movie. We were delayed, as the whole world was, we were delayed by COVID. Yes, and Talia is now giant. She's only 11, but she's a very, very tall 11. Am I missing anybody?
Lilli Stein is here too.
Lilli!
Yeah.
Hey! You remember Lilli from the conversations with Daniel, the philosophical, religious conversations. Yes. I do want to call up Evan Wood, who was the assistant director and editor of this film, which is a rare feat. That probably has never happened before in the history of cinema. So my right-hand man is responsible for a lot of what's good in this movie. Anybody else I'm forgetting? Is it Anna? Anna! Hey! Young Daphne! I can't see out there. Come on up. Sarah Nealis from the scenes in the doctor's office where their child is, yes. O is the, that's always my response. Hey, check. Hello? You guys can hear me? Yeah.
Are we missing anybody?
I think that's it for now. So,
let me start with a few questions, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. So prepare your questions. But let me start just where did this all come from? Where did it all begin?
So this is my 7th movie as a writer and director, and it was coming out of a movie that for me was the most complicated movie I ever made. It was a movie called Lost in Florence that was released by MGM about 3 years ago. It was a very difficult movie to make. We shot it in Italy, in Florence, unsurprisingly, I guess. And it was a lot of people. It was difficult. And so in response to that, I wanted to try to make this the most contained movie that I could, as minimal a film as could be made. And Evan and I had a lot of conversations as to how small a crew could actually be and still make a professional movie. And we ended up, how many?
How many crew? I don't think we had a day that was more than
12 or 13 people, except for the restaurant scenes, which you do need a lighting crew to light a restaurant. So, yeah, other than that, though, it was renegade filmmaking. Very smooth.
Yeah, I would say like 9 or 10 on a normal day. And I wrote the scene, I wrote all these day exteriors, these scenes that could be shot, just generally two characters walking down the street, having conversations that I thought were interesting. There are obviously a lot of different philosophical issues that are addressed. And so I wanted to make a movie that was more about ideas than about plot. There is something of a plot. Each character goes through something in this movie. It's not purely conversation, but it is obviously a very philosophical movie, and therefore not of interest to a lot of people. And I understand that, and that's okay, as long as there are some people out there who are interested in it.
And you, of course, have an amazing cast, some of them here with us tonight, and I'd love to hear about the process with the cast, what they knew about their characters, how you worked with them. Maybe we could start with the cast and hear their perspective on it. And any of you want to talk about the process a little bit?
I will start by saying it's different with every person and every time. We don't have, on a movie like this, we don't have time to spend the time we'd like to have before shooting. There's not rehearsal generally there's not rehearsal before we get there. So, we've all met before, but then when we show up, that's really that day we're figuring it out. I mean, I don't know if I had a conversation with any of you in advance. I mean, maybe brief, but really it's, you have to cast the right person. And when you're working with wonderful actors like I was fortunate enough to here, and a lot of them too, you see how many we have here, and there are a bunch more who aren't here. I mean, they're and all so good. It makes it easy for me as a director, obviously, but there still is, we still need a little bit of time to figure out how we're going to do it. Luckily, when you're making a movie with no lighting, we do have time to talk, right? Before we do the scene. Well, first we'll do the scene and we'll talk, and then we'll redo it. We kind of have time to focus on the performances because we're not worrying about the technical aspects of things. So with that, I'll pass it along.
I remember, I think I pretty much solidified the idea of the character and the idea of the scenes in the callback, because both of my scenes were in the audition and in the callback. So I sort of knew what I was doing before I got there. And we got there to the park, and we sort of just did it many times over, because it was a long talking scene while walking through people who weren't part of the movie, and we'd have to. It was really cool how the camera people were going like this while we were talking and having a conversation and not falling over. But yeah, the thing I appreciated about acting in this movie was the scenes are so long, and it felt like theater. You could actually get in there and sit in there, whereas with TV or and other movie scenes I've been, it's like 10 seconds and then it's the next thing. So that's what I appreciated.
Yeah, that's great. I second that. The callback was, I had my scene, and I remember doing it a few times and getting feedback, and then you just show up with that, right? And you just have fun and you play.
That's a good point. I guess I didn't mention that we have rehearsed the scene because everybody comes in, they do it once, and then they got called back, they do it again, and they do it with me. And so we do, in the audition process, we also are rehearsing. And something interesting that I did in this movie, because we shot it in two, I'm sure you could see, we shot it in two segments. So we shot the main body of the film, it was like early December, and we shot it in 2 weeks, and early December, with today's climate, usually it's balmy, right? It snowed on us 3 times in early December, which made it only fitting that our first screening here was in a hurricane. But I was able to actually use the snow to hopefully good effect in the movie. I used it in the end, and I end on the snowfall, and I don't think I ever even told Evan about this, but I was kind of doing a throwback to James Joyce's Dubliners, which ends with snowfall, and it's a short story about memory, and so I'm kind of referencing that at the end. So we used the snow. But what I was going to say is when I did the callback, so the second shoot was in June? October? Summerish. It was summerish. Because I wanted the flashback scenes to feel really like a different time of year, really like flashbacks. If we shot them at the same time of year, it might not have been so clear that they were flashbacks. So what I did is, after we had the callbacks, I showed the footage to the actors who played the grown-up roles. I don't know if I told you this. So I showed the auditions to Ian Kahn, who played grown-up Roland, because I wanted their feedback on who should play the young version of them, and he thought you were great.
He was there. Yeah, I remember.
He came.
I was sitting in the waiting room, and I was reading The Alchemist, the book, and I kind of knew you guys were waiting for him because you were like waiting. You know, I was waiting there for a bit, and then he like snuck through, and he noticed the book. He goes, "Oh man, great book!" And I felt like, "Oh my God, this is great."
No, you're absolutely right. The other actors couldn't come, so I sent them the clips, but Ian came, and then basically he just directed the callback.
It was great.
I just disappeared, and he's a great director.
It was awesome. Yeah.
Cool. Kate?
Well, I was just going to say that one of the things that's fun about acting and difficult about acting is that you have to develop a relationship with someone that you just met like 5 minutes ago. So what was interesting with Jackie was, we had some time in the makeup chair that morning, but then we had to be friends for years. And she's so warm and fabulous that it ended up being pretty easy to do that and sort of play best friends for the day. And actually what's funny is I just ran into her a couple of weeks ago. We were both out in Waterford, Connecticut at the O'Neill Center, and I was getting out of the car and she was getting out of the car, and we had just like had some Instagram something about this event, and I had written to her and I said, "Oh, are you going?" And because we spent a day being best friends, so now we kind of feel a little like we were best friends once upon a time, and it was this weird kismet. I mean, it's sort of like in the vibe of this movie in such a great way. It was this weird moment where we both stepped out of cars, like parked two away from each other. And I said, "Jackie?" She was like, "Kate?" And then we spent the whole night together, pretending we were best friends again. But yeah, so it's interesting. You have to sort of jump right into pretending to be not just the character, but having the relationships with other strangers that you just met. Hello, it's nice to meet you. I will be playing your wife today.
Speaking of Mrs. Epstein, who had a rich inner life, the smaller roles have their own challenges too, because just to echo what everybody else is saying, you really have to show up and know what you kind of want to do, because the director and the team is spending a lot of time working with the actors who have much larger parts and things to worry about. But I was very lucky because this is my second film with Evan, so he very generously invited me to just come and play, so I got to bypass that audition process. That's the secret of these small, fun little cameo roles too. But yeah, it was a great day. It was a lot of fun, and maybe I'm the only one who got to bypass it that wasn't related to Evan.
Well, I actually had to do like a mini audition, and it was kind of harder than like doing a regular audition. I mean, not actually, but like I had a scene where every scene I did, there was more than 2 people. So my dad was like reading every character, and it just felt weird because I was talking to the same person over and over again when there was supposed to be like 3 other people there. But then on the days that it happened, we had like, I'm pretty sure both of mine were filmed in the morning. So like we met up and we did like one rehearsal before we went into the park, or we went to like the cart, and that was our one rehearsal that we got, and then we just had to jump right into it. So it was kind of hard, but I feel like also the people I was doing it with are like really good at this. I was the non-professional one, and it was kind of easier that way because everybody else like made me feel like I did know them and they were my family. So I feel like I was lucky with the people who I got to be with.
I have to echo everyone else, and then add that we had the added pressure of working opposite Richard Kind. So walking into that was a little crazy and nerve-wracking, but it was such a great experience because everyone was so generous and kind and open to playing. So it was kind of like a master class on acting, and we had a great time.
Yeah. To echo on what Kate MacCluggage was saying about meeting your "Hi, I'm your wife," immediate intimate relationships. It was really special our day. the crew were building the doctor's office set upstairs and finishing that, and Andrew Hubbleson, who played my husband in the doctor's office with Kate Mulgrew, we just bonded. I happened to be 5 months pregnant at the time, and he had 2 small boys, and so it was a very special moment. And then to go into this set and film this scene with Kate Mulgrew was a very special treat. So this is absolutely surreal and an honor.
That scene was really hard. I mean, Sarah, I'm sure remembers. I've never done a scene before that I couldn't make it through the scene. I was getting so emotional, and I just didn't expect it. And I guess, I don't know. I don't know if I knew you were pregnant, or I was just thinking about my kids and thinking about a dying kid, and there's this one line in that scene that I was always worried about it. Sarah's heard me say this before. I was worried about it the whole time. I felt like it had to be there, but it was a really tricky line. And the line is, the effing aliens aren't going to save your daughter, which, out of context just sounds like a joke. It just sounds, but it's so poignant in that scene. Is the father, he's going to do anything as any father would. Anything for his kids, and so he hits upon, there's no hope, so he hits upon some unrealistic thing, which in a way is a sign of weakness. I mean, it's weakness masquerading as strength. He can't accept the reality. But then she says that line, and the performance is so powerful. And we were in that room, well, you were there too, and I started to cry so hard, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't say cut. I'm sure you had to say cut.
Fortunately, that was the last scene of the day. It was pretty much the only scene of the day, but that was it. After those takes, we were breaking down that stage, getting out, getting ready for the next day.
Yeah, and I remember so the first take I didn't make it through, and then the second take, I kind of knew it was going to happen, so I sort of did. I think I told you, actually, that's what it was.
We put up a wall between you.
Put up a wall between me and the actors, because it's not helpful for the director to break down in tears in the middle of the scene. Not helpful. So I was sort of off stage. You called action and cut, and I just was so profoundly affected in a way that I kind of consider unprofessional. I should be able to get through, but I couldn't. I think we have another guest, ladies and gentlemen, Richard Kind.
Thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.
Richard, how did you get, just to bring you right into the conversation, how did you get involved with the film?
Evan, you offered it to my agents, the role of the father at the end, and I said I will do it if I can play the father in the beginning as well. They were going to hire somebody else. And so I said, that's where the challenge is, and I'll do that. So if I can do that, then I'll do the movie.
And that is 100% true. The best decision I made in the entire making of this movie was listening to Richard when he suggested that he play both the older and the younger Morty. I somehow had this idea in my mind that I would cast 2 separate actors. And of course, you do it with kid roles, it makes sense, although you got to really cast it right. It's not easy to find kids that are a believable match. But in that case, I don't know what possessed me to think I could cast one actor as a 45-year-old, another as a 75-year-old, and have it be believable. I think my initial idea, I don't know if I ever told you this, Richard, I'm friends with a guy named Brian Cox.
I love Ryan.
And I'm friends with his son, Alan Cox.
Oh, yeah.
They're both great actors, and they look sort of similar, look pretty similar. Alan lives in London. That's problem number one. So just that.
That's a shame. You would have done better. And I'm very pleased with what I did. But
So
you would all know Brian Cox if you saw his phenomenal.
So I had that idea, but then Richard suggested this, and I had to sit down with it for a second and think, okay, I just wanted it to be believable. And it turns out, with the makeup, it's incredibly believable. The makeup people did an extraordinary job. Now, whenever I see Rich in reality, I'm like, oh my God, you're so young.
No, I'm not.
But it is a fabulous transformation between those 2 scenes, and then cutting between them in those moments at the end, with them looking at each other, is just a beautiful moment.
Yeah, I
The
mean,
past and the present meeting.
you know, those to have Rich and Kate together. You know, I love that scene so much, and Barbara Barry is so wonderful in this movie. You know, what's nice about it really is a wide range. You have a bunch of kids who were 8 years old when we shot it, and you have Barbara who was a lot more than that when we shot it. And that's, you know, that's New York, right?
So let me ask, who are the Meyersons? Who are the Meyersons to you?
Well, I actually should point out that it's a family of four, New York Jewish family of four. I should recognize my parents who are here and had a New York Jewish family of four. Where are you? Mom and Dad, raise your hand. There they are. So they also had 2 boys and 2 girls. I don't see a whole lot of similarity between that family and our family, but there's probably something there. You know, it's interesting to look at it and try to think about the family dynamics and how much of the movie is about the individual stories and how much of it is about the family story. And I think it has to be a blend of both. And it's about the family as kids. It's about their relationship to the state. The tricky part is making it all feel integrated, making it all feel like one family, when in reality it's, you know, 30, 40 different people. So that is the challenge. And again, it's all in the actors' hands. It all relies on the actors doing great work.
So before we take questions from the audience, I have to ask one more question. Tell us about the aliens. So where did that come from?
So the aliens. So in large part, this is obviously this small, contained New York art film, right? It's the story of this family that nothing earth-shattering happens to, just the dramas of daily life. But I also, simultaneously, as I was writing this, I was thinking, what would be something interesting that would happen off-screen, something really theoretical that could change everyone's lives, change everyone's perspectives. I shouldn't say change everyone's, potentially change their perspectives. So the first thing I thought of, what could be the most important thing that we could get news of on our iPhone? Not pandemic. The first thing I came up with that I thought would be the most important thing we could ever learn would be proof of the existence or non-existence of God. I thought that would that would be it. That would change everything for some people. For some people, maybe it wouldn't change anything. And I thought, don't really know how to make a movie about that. So then I thought, well, what about switching God with aliens? What if there was proof of life outside of our Earth? For some people, it changes everything. For some people, it has minimal effect. So that was really it. It was kind of taking this big concept and sticking it into this very contained movie.
Thank you. Now, nobody from the audience has any questions because we got over the alien thing. We'll take some questions from the audience. Here you go, sir.
Given that you had so little, if any, rehearsal, were there times when lines were completely blown? And if and when that happened, did you find that the lines that were being used perhaps were better than the ones that were written?
Well, hold on a second. Let me look at who we've got here. Nope, none of these guys ever blew a line.
Perfect. All of us.
No, you have a movie like this. There's so much talking. It's such a challenge. I mean, you know, I guess Lilli was saying it's like theater, and it is. But you don't have the rehearsal you have when you do a play. You have a very long time to get used to the dialogue and work it. And here we didn't. And you know, she had to do the scene where has 3 pages of dialogue while she's walking through an entire park and navigating her way around people. And of course, you know, it's never going to end up exactly the way you anticipate. But part of the pleasure of filmmaking is adjusting on the fly. So maybe you find something great in the moment, or maybe in the editing you see something, right? I mean, we found a lot of things in the editing that we didn't anticipate that made their way into the movie. And then also, you know, something that's really important is you have to, just as I listened to Rich when he suggested that he was the right person to play both parts, I listened to Kate Mulgrew when she said at the end of the movie, there was a whole nother plot line that we described, not really a plot line actually, just a metaphor that we discarded that was supposed to end the movie. And Kate said that final scene with her and Richard, she felt like it didn't have a proper ending, and she suggested that I create one. And I went home that night, and I wrote that last line that she says, which is, you know, he says, doesn't matter, and maybe that wasn't even there. He says, doesn't matter. She says, everything matters, all of it, which is intended to sort of sum up the movie in a certain way and gives us a satisfying ending. And if she hadn't told me that, if she hadn't suggested that to me, we wouldn't have had that. So, you know, it's just, it's being collaborative. It's being not really improvisational, but just being in the moment and not being rigid. It's critical.
I want to thank everybody for coming because it makes a movie so much more meaningful when you hear from the actors and the directors, so we're going to thank you. But my question is I noticed that during the filming of the movie, everything was looking from above, looking down. And I want to know if what that effect was is for you to make us feel like we're all really small in the world's scheme of things, or that God's looking down, or there's really aliens?
Yeah, I misspoke when I said there were 2 shoots. There were actually 3 shoots, because there also was a drone shoot. So we had this drone, and we got some photography that at that point hadn't really been done in New York City before, so it was really cool to get this, to do this drone photography. It is intended to put ideas in your mind. I hesitate to say exactly what, because one thing I've learned in making this movie, and maybe I should have known it earlier, is that it might sound weird, but intention is really only half the game. You know, I might intend a certain something, but what you pull out of it is equally important. And if you pull something out of it that wasn't what I intended, it doesn't make your conception any worse than mine. So it's in a way, seeing a movie is a collaboration between what we put up there and what you pull from it. So. But yeah, the drone footage is intended to evoke potentially a God's eye view. There's a lot of talk of God, and you see all these little ants walking around. So that's, and then it does prefigure the alien stuff. It actually becomes kind of an alien point of view.
I wanted to know if the younger set knew, if everybody, the entire cast, knew the story. Because I could conceive of the younger ones not knowing what happened later, because in fact they don't know what happens later. So that's question 1. And number 2, I'd like to know from anybody who wants to answer how you prepared for your role. You didn't have a lot of time, at least on the set itself, but how did you think about this? Because this is very cerebral, but it is so impactful, talking about the lives of everybody that we see on screen.
That's very interesting. I would like actually Richard to first answer that, because he's the one person who plays the same character in the present and in the past, and that's a great challenge when you're playing. Well, I guess this is for you to answer. When you're playing the past character, obviously that character doesn't know what's going to happen. I mean, it's an interesting dichotomy.
I'm going to get all esoteric about acting. All of the answers are in the script. If you have a question, read the script. You don't have to do research. It's all in the script. So, at the beginning, who am I? I'm having mental problems, mental issues. I have to leave. I'm having a tough time because I love my children. I know that this is abandonment, abandoning my family. And so you play pretend. Playing pretend isn't always a fun play pretend, but you're pretending that you're a guy with mental problems. So that's it. And you don't think what the end will be. That should not impact that present. But at the end of the movie, which I did before I did anything else, I had to pretend what walking with my son would have been like, what having a catch would have been like with my child, right? With my daughter, right? It's been so long. And that was sort of easy because months passed between the time when we filmed the restaurant scene and when I saw my kids young. It's simply play pretend. If you're Willie Loman, you don't think that you're going to kill yourself at the beginning of the play, but you play pretend that there's no other way out. You're going to die. You're going to kill yourself. And that's how it is. So that's how it is. And I did have to use my imagination about what it would have been like to talk to my children about abandoning them and leaving them. That's, and then so that when I come back and see them, my tail is between my legs. I am a contrite person. They're going to be resentful to me. How do I treat that? And I just took it. I took it all. They deserve to be resentful. And that's what I played.
That's interesting. It would have been, it was a challenge. It would have been easier for Richard if we'd shot the flashback stuff first,
Well,
and
of
then.
course, but that's movie making.
Yeah,
That's how movies are done. You shoot the end. Sometimes the end is the first thing you shoot because it's the toughest thing. Maybe it has more special effects than everything else gets done. It doesn't matter. Your movies are shot out of order, which is why, as an actor, I like doing theater. Because you start, I didn't think that was as funny, but you start the beginning of the evening feeling one way, and the events of that evening are an arc, so that by the time you get there, you get to go along for the ride. This is segmented, and that's what movies are. They're segments that add up to the story you see.
Let me take that to Brian. Did you think about your adult character as you were?
Well, it's so funny that you asked that question because I came here today saying, I wonder what this movie's going to be. Because I didn't read the script. I never received the script when auditioning. I showed up to set only knowing my little, what I had. That's all I had to go by. So this was a fun experience to watch this movie for the first time. So of course I couldn't foresee anything. I don't know who I was. I knew I was playing the young Ian Khan, and that's all I had to go off of. I watched a bunch of his interviews. I tried to get a sense of how he spoke and how he carried himself, but that's really all I had to go with.
So is this a shot?
Yeah.
Anna, what about you?
Oh, here you go.
I actually did get the script, so it wasn't that much of a surprise. But it did change very much from how it presented on paper to the final cut. I did a similar thing. I looked up Jackie, and she doesn't. She's a Broadway actress. She's Elphaba in Wicked. So there wasn't so much footage of her on screen, but there's a lot of her on stage, and so I kind of peeked at that and then just trusted that I would do the best I could, stayed in the present as much as possible, and had fun.
See, that's it. It's so easy to be in my job because they do all the work. They're doing each actor is really thinking so hard about their character that's why it's really important for me to listen to them when they have thoughts, because they're seeing it from this perspective that I don't have. I have the macro view and they have the micro view, and so they can pick up things that I might not pick up in the macro view.
So we're out of time, but let me first of all say thank you very much to everyone. Let me tell the audience, tell your friends to see this movie. You can watch it virtually through the JCC Film website. Where else is the film available?
Opening in Los Angeles on Friday.
Say again?
It's opening in Los Angeles on Friday.
Opening in Los Angeles on Friday. So tell your friends in LA and help spread the word. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for a wonderful film and a great conversation.